for our Public Safety Committee meeting. Today's agenda, we will be discussing Wake Tech, increased population at Wake County Detention Center, dam safety, and the Wake County Jail planning update. Okay, Commissioner Mile, we're live.
Thank you so much, Brittany, and everyone. Good morning. I hope everyone had a great weekend. Looking forward to kicking our meeting off this morning. We got some great topics, and of course, since Commissioner Calabria is not on yet, we will come back and approve the minutes from our last meeting. But first thing we have on this morning is Wake Tech Public Safety Campus, with some great information that they're going to bring forward to us. I think that's Dr. Green and Dr. Wicker. So which one is going to come up first? Dr. Green, you going to bring it up first?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So I'm right. Okay. So I'm Gail Green, Executive Vice President over Operations, and I've had the pleasure and privilege for many years of being part of our bond building programs. And so I'm very excited to talk about Wake Tech East this morning. I'm just going to introduce it quickly and turn things over to Dr. Wicker. Our public safety simulation complex at Wake Tech East, located in Wendell, is $60 million in bonds, 80,311 square feet. And of course, we can train law enforcement, EMS, UAV programs, and we also have a driver training pad at this location. And although the primary focus for this building was function, I think it's also a beautiful building because we want our public safety, all of the various members of our public safety community to feel like they are in our very best space and that they feel very valued. Next slide. And before I turn it over to Jamie, I never miss an opportunity to acknowledge where our money comes from. And I always wish to thank the Wake County taxpayers and the county commissioners. So we're so grateful that you gave us this opportunity, that you entrusted us to provide this training for the whole county. So thank you so much. And now, next slide. My pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Jamie Wicker. And I think it's fair to say that there's no one any more passionate about public safety in Wake County than Dr. Wicker. She's our provost for public safety education and training. And we have lots of pictures, and I'm sure she's ready to share them with you. So Dr. Wicker.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Green. You did a great job, and thank you for inviting us. And I do think it's pretty fair to say that I don't know that there's many people more excited about public safety in Wake County than I am. So it's good to be among friends. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm very excited to discuss what we do at Wake Tech and what we do for Wake County and for this entire region related to public safety at our Public Safety Simulation Center at Wake Tech East. So next slide, please. And I will tell you that I have a lot of pictures here because I wanted to illustrate, so they're for illustrative purposes, to illustrate kind of some of the things that we do and how they look in the real world and why we use these different training facilities and how we need to use them. And I also wanted to tell you that everything that we do in the public safety world is, one, a perishable skill set, but two, we have to build stacks of skills on top of skills. And so when you're looking at a public safety response, you're looking at multiple people working together in tandem to achieve a certain goal. And that sometimes you have time to pregame and plan things out, and sometimes you don't. So the more that you can reduce time on task because you are more efficient, because you are more communicative, because you understand how to get to where you need to go, utilizing various tools because people already understand their jobs and roles and functions, the more efficient and effective we can be. So those are things that we look at for training. Other than what you would consider a very typical hard skill set, we also look at how can we do it better? How can we do it faster? How can we do it more succinctly? How can we work better multidisciplinary or multi-agency? So you'll see some of that, and I'll take questions at any point. But most of this is me taking you through what we have, and then showing you kind of how we use that, what that looks like in the real world, and then giving you a little bit of information, some statistics from this facility. And then I'll take questions along the way or at the end. This is an overview. You see to the right, kind of to the bottom right, our public safety simulation complex building. And to the left, that large concrete, that's our driving pad that's reinforced. And we keep that very, very busy with public safety driving. So, driving is a skill set and emergency vehicle operation is a skill set. So we practice lots of different types of driving. So not only can we practice beginner driving and all the different apparatus and all the different types of driving that that emergency responders need to be proficient in, but you will notice this is also attached to the building through through that what looks like a parking lot at the back. We call that a staging area. So you can actually drive into the building from that location, which gives us a tremendous opportunity for complex training evolutions where someone can actually be dispatched from the driving pad into the building and they can do the driving portion. And in public safety response, it's very important to make sure that your vehicle placement is accurate based on the type of call you're going to and based on what your goal is and what you're trying to accomplish. So there's a lot of things that we can practice in here that oftentimes we don't even think about, and the public doesn't think about, just even vehicle placement. Next slide, please. That's another overview from that perspective. You can see the garage door kind of directly in front of you. You see the blue dots, and then you see the garage door in front of you, which gives you the view of a course. There's a gate, and then you can drive into the building that way if we set up the training that way. Next slide, please. That's an overview of our driving pad and how it relates to the complex. We do call it a complex because everything for the building on the bottom right, which is our building, and the driving pad and all of the area around that and everything around that, we designed that very specifically for training purposes. And that is all a secured space. That is not like, oh, I'm going to stop by and drop in and see what's going on. It's all very secured, and we consider that to be training space. One of our focuses is reality-based training, and reality-based training, not so much like virtual reality, but we're going to use role players. We're going to use force on force. We're going to be shooting back and forth at each other. We're going to be yelling back and forth. We're going to be driving after each other. We're going to be chasing people. We're going to have people who have injuries, mock injuries. We're going to use moulage. We're going to do mass casualty. So this is a training space like none other, and it's really, really valuable and fantastic. There's, I was doing an interview for a syndicated article from San Diego, and they were having me talk about simulated and reality-based training. And one of the things that I said is, it's one thing to describe chaos, it's another thing to experience chaos. And so experiencing chaos, we know, helps people to respond better to chaos when you have to really respond. So having seen it, having know how to process that, handle that stress response, those are things that we practice and that we do. Next slide, please. So this is our driving pad in use. You'll see on the left the city of Raleigh out there with their tiller trucks. This driving pad is reinforced to be able to handle multiple training evolutions with tiller trucks and heavy fire apparatus. They are incredibly heavy, about 80 to 90,000 pounds, depending upon the equipment that they have. And so contrary to your original thought might be, they're so large, they're difficult, they're actually quite agile because they are actually hinged. They're like a tractor trailer, like a tractor drawn aerial apparatus is what often they're called. And so that gives them a little bit of agility in municipalities where they can turn, whereas the apparatus you see on your right, it doesn't have a hinge, so it has a different turning ratio. So a lot of municipalities in this area and in other areas are going to tiller trucks, which give you also capability for mid-rise and high-rise fire response. They're difficult to navigate because you have a driver in the front and a driver in the back. So our driving pad has been a place where City of Raleigh and others have really driven their tiller trucks to get some practice there. And lots of fire driving on our driving pad, and we're very glad to see that. Next slide, please. This is the interior of our building, and it's beautiful. Next slide, please. I want to get to the pictures. This is the inside, so you can see what that looks like. Where you can drive in. On the left, you'll see kind of a slanted face, and that would be kind of akin to a retail space like a CVS or something like that. If you were going to respond to a CVS inside there, you can't see it. It's not installed in this image, but later you'll see we have a movable wall space so that you can actually reconfigure the interior of that room to be whatever you need it to be based on the response you're going to have. And then on your right, we have a hotel space where we have 2 hotel rooms. We have a restaurant. We have a bar. We have a school. We have a detention and correction center pod. And then a little bit further down, about the second street light on your right, you'll see a little balcony there, and that is our townhome. So there's also a townhome built entirely to scale in this space so that you can respond to a townhome. What I love about this is, again, going back to the simulation, Wake Tech's really made a commitment to creating spaces like where you would work. So you could respond to a hotel, you could respond to a traffic crash, you could respond to a retail space, you could respond to a school, you could respond to a jail or a detention center. There are infinite possibilities that we could perform here, and I'm really, really excited. And it's been incredibly utilized in the short time that we've been open. Next slide, please. This is another view. In the upper right-hand corner, what you'll see is our control room that overlooks the street scene, and we have the ability to control much of the lighting and technology inside that space from that room. And one of the benefits of this is, so this entire space, we treat this like a range, and it falls under range requirements. So we have some hazmat considerations here, and there's a lot of accreditation considerations around range use here because it is all live fire. So we do use live fire in all of this space. But one of the things that's a benefit here is you can do daytime or nighttime operations, whether it's day or night outside. So we've had a lot of work where we have done nighttime operations and using night ops and things like that. During the day, we just come in, turn the lights off, make it completely dark, and do night operations. And that has been a tremendous benefit to the county and others. Next slide, please. You'll see on the left some traffic stops and some classes that are going on. You'll notice that everybody's wearing reflective gear. That is our safety officers. We have students going through some specific training that's occurring there. And then on the top left, kind of by that first that first street light, you'll see some people standing up there watching what's happening from a different perspective. And everyone is wearing different gear. That's because this is a shooting scenario where there's an option of shooting. And so we have to wear different gear when we do that. So there's a lot of different gear that's required. It's another reason that this is a closed space because of the shooting and the gear required. On the right, what you'll see is a Bearcat that was doing forcible entry on the townhome door. So there's, again, another capability that can be practiced here. Another benefit of this is a lot of public safety training needs to occur behind some closed doors so that there's some discretion where the general public doesn't understand or learn the tactics that we utilize, nor do they get a good front row seat to all the equipment that we have. So this is where we have a lot of training that occurs, where there's a lot of high speed, higher level training that occurs in these spaces with some training equipment tactics that we don't want to be seen by the general public. Next slide, please. This is just a photograph from our open house to show, again, kind of scale of the inside of the building. That's a Wendell fire truck from when we did our open house. Next slide, please. This is where we did a multi-agency response, and we were doing training for multiple agencies that day on multiple things. And so I just thought it was good to show you, again, the size, but also you can see a lot of Wake County agencies represented here training together where there's not a lot of opportunity to train together and working out those kinks that I talked about in the beginning so that if there is a large-scale response where they're needed, you've got Apex and Holly Springs and lots of agencies that maybe don't get to train together that much, but if they show up on a scene together, they've already trained, they already kind of know each other, they already have worked out some of the communication. Next slide, please. This is a view from our control room, so it gives you a different perspective. Across from the retail pod on the top of that, you'll see a catwalk. if anybody on here has SWAT experience or military experience, you know that utilizing a catwalk for instruction of SWAT tactics and things like that is incredibly, incredibly important and invaluable. So I'm really glad that we have the catwalk that we have, and it's incredibly extensive. Next slide, please. That is the movable wall system that I mentioned to you that we can reconfigure, and we've reconfigured it several times. Currently, it's set up in a system that allows for some training of like long hallways and things like that that aren't as long in other parts of the building, so that different skill sets can be practiced here. Next slide, please. That's a view of the catwalk, so you can see how extensive that is. Next slide, please. This is our school where you'll see people doing a rapid deployment training for an active shooter in a school system. So it's very difficult to find schools where you can actually do shoot, don't shoot scenarios for training, because we don't want to damage the schools. So they leave marking rounds, they damage things. I am very, very proud of Wake Tech and Wake County's commitment to realistic training where you can shoot and the bad guys shoot back at you in spaces that look like where you're going to be deployed to, so that we don't have even that initial second of, oh, let me reorient, let me figure out what I'm doing. You've already done it. Let's get in there and get the job done. I'll just point out, even the clock. The clock, doesn't it look like a clock you've seen in every elementary school you've ever been to? So I love that we are down to the details. It's very realistic. Next slide, please. That's our hotel lobby. So you could imagine having sitting around, talking if you've ever been to a Hampton Inn or something like that in the evening. Next slide, please. This is one of our hotel rooms, and we have specialized furniture. Furniture is incredibly expensive. It's very durable, and it's specifically designed to take sim rounds and to be used for force-on-force training. Next slide, please. This is our corrections and detention pod, and this could be, any jail anywhere. So it is, again, incredibly realistic. And when you see corrections and detention, sometimes we think, oh, well, that's going to work for DOCC, detention officer training, and it does. But what sometimes people don't think about is you have every kind of response needed in a jail or detention center. For example, I'm a firefighter. In my fire district, we have a jail. We also have a prison. Very commonly, we have to respond. Most people know that firefighters tend to be EMTs. Well, they have cardiac events. They have OB events. They have issues that occur. They pop sprinkler heads. So if you don't have the experience of that, it can be a little daunting to say, you got to go into a jail pod or you got to go into a prison to handle something that you didn't intend to. So we get to practice some of that here and practice those processes. Next slide, please. This is, again, some of the utilization. This is in our detention and correction pod with some of the K9 units. Next slide, please. Our EMS ambulance bay. Next slide, please. An ambulance. So again, simulation. We call it a mobile simulation. Exactly where you could, where you would treat patients. Next slide, please. And driving, ambulance driving. We do a lot of EMS driving on our driving pad. Next slide, please. So this is our sim rig that we have inside of our sim lab for EMS. Our EMS program is housed at this location as well. So this is a simulation of the back of an ambulance in a building so that we can tie this to some other types of simulation as opposed to going and driving and coming back. We can do this in a faster loop of time. Next slide, please. This is the inside of the sim rig. It's not outfitted with equipment. We don't have equipment to outfit the inside of that yet, or supplies just yet. But you can see that it looks exactly like the inside of an ambulance with some cameras so that we can see what's happening inside and outside. Next slide, please. That's the side of our sim rig. Next slide, please. And we are going to be building a fire rescue training center out there. We're very, very excited about that. So I'm going to pause just a second and see if there are any questions. I'm going to move into the fire rescue portion of what we're going to build out there, or I can wait till the end.
Commissioners, either one of you guys have any questions at this time? Go ahead, Commissioner Stallings.
Hi, yes, thank you and good morning. Just curious with the open fire practice that you all do, how does that damage the facilities and how do you all mitigate that?
I think that's a great question. Can I wait till I do the fire portion to answer that?
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and also we got Commissioner Calabria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for walking us through this. It's just an amazing facility. But I did want to ask you how we are able to provide services, how we are able to collaborate with law enforcement and other entities outside of Wake County. So state agencies, federal agencies, it's my understanding we've got a lot of relationships and a lot of people envious of our facility. But I was wondering if you'd say a little bit more about that.
Certainly. And just for my clarification, when you say how, do you mean how do we do it or how can we do more of it?
Yes.
Both? Okay. Okay. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to answer that right now in overview, and I have a little bit more detail at the very end about that. So we have a fee waiver structure that allows us to provide fee waiver to agencies that are in public safety, taking public safety classes and training in North Carolina. For feds, we charge them, they have to pay. But I belong to a lot of groups. My team belongs to a lot of groups. And so I'm actually travel nationally. My area of expertise is public safety training academies and reality-based training, and was just asked to head a group nationally for that. So we're very, very well known for that here. And so people come to us all the time and say, hey, can I come see it? Can we train there? Most federal agencies already have a budget for training. They're going to have to go somewhere. So we bring them here. I work very hard to be a convener of people and resources. So when I try to find out what are your goals, what are you trying to accomplish, let me bring you to somebody else that can do that. I just came back from a national conference and multiple people from all over the country were like, can you help me do this? Can you help me do that? So, the week before that, I was in Connecticut doing meeting with their commissioner of public safety who oversees fire, EMS, and law enforcement for the whole state of Connecticut. And he was asking me about several things that they need to do and wanted to collaborate even with us in North Carolina. So I think the how is we just really care about public safety and people know that and we do it well. And I'm still active as a police officer, firefighter, EMT. So people still see me on the side of the road and I think that gives us credit and my team does that. So we still care a whole lot about what we do. We have great partnerships, and in Wake County, we have a lot of support for public safety. You don't have to worry so much that you're going to have a bad training facility, that you're going to be out training, people are going to come by and throw stuff at you or scream and yell at you. You know, we don't have to worry about that. Also, the public safety agencies generally understand that we get what they're trying to do. And I want to talk about just briefly the partnerships in Wake County that bring credibility to that are not just Wake Tech, but Chief Patterson, she was with me at the conference that I just came back from, and you know, the sheriff and our presence with the Highway Patrol and the state agencies that are here. We all get it. We all talk. We all spend time together. We have great relationships. We get it. So I don't have to say, hey, Sheriff, look, I really need you to not do this thing. I need you to do this other thing instead. We speak the same language, so we understand the idea of, hey, this is going to be closed, and we have discretion here, and we need to keep it closed. Or we're going to bring somebody else in, and I need you to work with them, but I need y'all to not talk about it. You know what I mean? Things like that. So there's already a reputation for public safety in this area and in this region that is stellar. So people already want to train, and then we have the facilities and the resources on top of that. And then we have a way to make some of that where it is free or lower cost, and people just are chomping at the bit. So we've had a lot of work with federal agencies, state agencies. And one thing that I'm really proud of is that agencies call us spur of the moment and say, hey, can I use your facility and get in there? I had a sheriff call me from another place and said, hey, I got 2 officers that I need to return to duty. They were in a shooting. I need to return them to duty. Can you get me out there so we can do a return to duty, shoot, don't shoot qualification and get them back on the road? And when we had these candidates come into our area, we got calls very commonly from federal agencies and state agencies who said, hey, we need to go out there and do some practicing because we're going to have a caravan coming through and we need to work with these agencies really quickly. Can we do some dry runs? Absolutely. Come on out. We'll take care of you. So the bottom line is, even though, and Dr. Green, I hope this isn't speaking out of turn. Even though we want to be able to maintain our buildings, even though we understand that we need to, there is a component of making money for the college, right? We don't think about that first. We think about this is a service to the public, and this is part of the reason that people want to come here. And when I say come here, I don't mean come to Wake Tech, I mean come to Wake County. This is why industry wants to come here. This is why people want to come here, because it's safe, because we're well trained. And so we think about what is the best use of this facility to this region, to this area, and that's how we utilize it. I can go back to my last few slides if you don't mind, and then I will answer Commissioner Stalin's question.
Yeah,
Did I
please
answer your
do.
question?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. Great
Okay.
work.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Wicker, please go ahead, and we'll wait at the end to complete the additional questions.
Sure. So we'll be building 2 training towers, essentially, and a few other things here. A 6-story burn building, which is going to be a Class A burn building, a 5-story training tower, a vehicle extrication ditch, material storage, drafting pit, shade structure, restrooms, and we're still designing it. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. That's the general overview master plan. And next slide, please. Next slide, please. You'll see on the left the burn building. These are obviously renderings, and on the right, the training tower. This is a Class A burn building, which means that you can burn normal combustible things, paper, straw, wood, things like that. And that's important because you have to be able to read smoke and fire conditions as a firefighter, as opposed to just saying, oh, we're just going to burn some propane and put that out, because, you know, you put the wet stuff on the hot stuff, the fire typically goes out. But when you're going to a scene and you're doing a 360, you need to understand what are the fire conditions, how do you need to best do your fire attack. And I feel like I'm in Director Alfred's, lane here, but that's generally why there's value to that. Now, the reason that it's important that it's so tall is because in Wake County and in Raleigh, we're not building out so much as we're building up these days. And it is very different firefighting above 3 floors. So you get into mid-rise firefighting, you get into high-rise firefighting, you get into the deployment of that tiller apparatus that you saw earlier in the presentation, which is important. And you get into having to carry things, having to carry water hose, having to get into standpipes, which are in stairwells, as opposed to hydrants, which are out in the yard or somewhere around there. So lots of different things there. Next slide, please. This is an example of some of the things that we do. To the left, you'll see a ladder approach to a fire. And so these are laddering, things like that we have to build on skill sets. People think about firefighting as just being water and fire, but you have to think about, how do you get your firefighters out? How do you get victims out? How do you get someone out who's injured? How do you get to the second floor faster? How do you get equipment up there? Things like that. And then on the right, that's us in an acquired structure. That's me taking the picture. I had to back out of the fire a little bit so that I could honestly not melt my phone and take off my glove to take the picture. And so that's inside, and that's where we build to. We learn all these skill sets. We burn in a controlled burn building. We're fortunate to get some acquired structures, which are houses that developers are going to tear down. They give them to us, let us train in them, and we burn them with students for a lot of different types of responses. Next slide, please. This is a view of the training tower, and you'll see some rope functions happening. To your right, you'll see some vehicle extrication things that are happening, or TR, technical rescue. Most of the ropes and things like that are going to fall under technical rescue as opposed to firefighting, but those are elements of rescue, firefighting, and emergency response. So fire and rescue, a lot of times people hear fire and rescue and they think rescue means rescue squad, but it means rescuing people, rescuing scenes, making them secure so that you can go in safely and get people out or provide treatment or do the next thing. Next slide, please. So here's what some of that can look like in real life. You saw some road work on the previous slide. On the right, this is Raleigh Fire Department at Keeter, and they are doing rope work where they're getting people off a tower off the top, and you have to know how to do that well. And that's a very complex task. Everything from putting on the equipment right, tying the knots right, and then communicating up and down, holding each other, wearing your equipment properly. It's very dangerous, but we do train those things. On the left, you see a Stokes basket with equipment where we're getting stuff to people, and you could potentially get people evacuated from that same idea. Next slide, please. This is some of the vehicle extrication that we were doing. On the left is a real world application of a wreck. So if somebody's trapped, that car you see is stuck on a fence and up against a tree. You can't just go in there and start cutting it apart and pulling people out, because the structural integrity of that's going to change, and it could fall on people. It could move, it could change, it can fall. So it has to be stabilized, and then you have to do things to provide care to get people out, and you have to do it quickly. So the time to learn what to do is not on the way to the call or at the call. So on the right is where this, I actually cut that car up. I did that. I placed those things there, and we cut the roof off of it. It was a normal looking car before we tore it all up and cut like the steering wheel off of it. But those are things that you do in practice to learn how to do that on the left, so that when you have to do it, you already know how to do it. And you learn little things like, hey, this equipment's really heavy, and I probably don't want to carry it that far. So I want to get as close as I can that's safe, so that we can do this, or it's going to take 2 or 3 people, because this is going to take a long time to do it. So I'm going to need some other people to help me do it. And so you learn about manpower and lots of different things. Next slide, please. Again, on the right, you'll see this is from the Wake County Essential School, and this is learning, this young firefighter is learning how to force a door open. So she's using a Halligan tool to force a door open in forcible entry, and that's a very, very basic level skill that you learn, so that you can stack that onto other things, so that on the left, they're fighting fire on a roof, which involves ventilation and getting the equipment up there and lots of things like that. But you also have to learn how to utilize all those tools. And so on the right, very, very basic. On the left, advanced. Next slide, please. General overview, we had a soft opening from March to June, basically our driving pad only, and we did fire, police, and EMS driving classes. We are very busy. And I wanted to show you, here is a live burn that we did, and you'll see police, fire, EMS out there together hanging out, and that's what's required at all these calls. Next slide, please. You'll notice this is the fire academy that Wake County and Wake Tech do together on the right, because again, this is what it looks like when we train together. But I wanted to put this in some sort of concept that would make sense. So we opened fully in August of 2024, and since we've been open, we've done over 80,000 training hours at that facility. And we've had multiple agencies, both collaborative and joint response training. So I'm just really excited to say that we've done 80,000. I expect we'll do 90,000 by the end of 2024. And I think that speaks for itself, that we've been open less than a year, and I think we will do 90,000 training hours by the end of the year. That's so impressive to me. And it speaks volumes to the partnership, that when we ask you for stuff and you give it to us, there's not a downtime. It's not dormant. It's not sitting unused. We are out there from 6, 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, 6, 7 days a week since we've been open. So thank you. Next slide, please. Questions and comments. Commissioner Stalin, I haven't forgot about you. Commissioner Mayo, how are we on time?
I think okay. Brittany, how much time we got left? I think we're good. Go ahead, Commissioner.
We got enough time.
Okay, awesome. Go ahead, Commissioner Stalin.
Well, I had just asked about just managing the open fire damage and so forth, but I just also want to say this is just amazing. I mean, talking about state of the art. I mean, this is so impressive about how all this is developed, and obviously it's being very well put to good use. So just really appreciative to you and your work and all the staff in Wake Tech. And so just asking about damage mitigation, but also just curious, and you may have said this and I missed it. Is there a charge for everyone who seeks training at the facility?
No, ma'am, there isn't.
Okay.
And
Okay.
and I have your question. I'm going to address it right now. And thank you. And again, this is partnership. You can't do anything like this by yourself. So this is not Jamie Wicker out here doing this by herself. This is a team of people at Wake Tech, a team of people with the county, a team of people nationally. This is people everywhere working together. And I got to give a shout out to the county at lots of levels, and especially Daryl Alford and his team. They are so helpful, so responsive, so incredible at helping us identify. What we try to do is identify where are there areas that are needed that we can build in that don't already exist. So we're not trying to duplicate things and say, oh, we did it better. We're trying to say, okay, what's a need that doesn't exist right now, or a need that we can fill? As far as damage mitigation to the building, we have engineers that specifically build live fire training facilities. And so there's different types of materials that go inside the burn rooms of the building. So you have designated spaces that are called burn cells, where you will light fire and burn. And those have additional structures inside the building that are kind of like, and I'm watering this down, but it's like insulation, so that those inner layers, bottom and top and around that, can be insulated. It can be replaced, so that you're not replacing the entire building, you're replacing that. And then there are some things that you have to look at relative to what's called fire load. So when we burn there are areas that can take a higher fire load than others. And so fire can be hot, obviously, but you can have hotter fires than other fires. And so managing that with our instructor pool and understanding, hey, this is not a place that you build the biggest fire you could possibly build just because everybody's going to be impressed by how big a fire you can build. This is where we want this thing to last for a while. So over here is where you build a really big one. Everywhere else you build a smaller one, or things like that we know about the building that we're building that are intentional. So thank you for that question. People that are in state who work at most public safety agencies and are taking training in their field are considered eligible for fee waiver. And that's set by the system office generally. And so there's some very specific specifications that we have to follow, but we try to make things fee waived as much as possible so that there's not additional cost to the agency, which allows us to be a force multiplier, so that instead of agencies building structures that are going to sit in one place, we can build and buy things that are useful to everyone, and they can put that request into more fire stations or salary increases or better equipment that's going to go out to the citizenry. And so that's part of how we use that as a force multiplier. And I think I really exploit, if I could say it that way. I mean, I'm okay saying that. I really exploit fee waiver as much as possible. And I think people probably, even the system office sometimes has kind of been like, Jamie, really? And I'm like, hey, I'm greater good here, greater good. So thank you for your question, ma'am.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your responses and just the amazing work you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Okay, Dr. Wicker. Well, I see our chair just popped her hand up. Commission Thomas.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say, well done. We have been out to visit. We came to the open house. I've gotten to see the facility in person on several occasions, and then also talked to folks who've trained there. And it's one thing for us to be impressed because we don't have necessarily, the same information, right? But for people who are training or people who are doing continuing education, who've already been in this field for such a long time, to come and see and still be impressed, that is impressive, right? Like that is where that we are literally setting the gold standard for the region in this. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much. And then I have a question. I know that it's like a range, and because I actually asked about events and things, and Matt and Gail and Dr. Rawls were quick to say, "Oh, we can't do stuff like that here." But I did want to know if the commissioners wanted to take a tour, or in all honesty, I would love for some of our staff folks, the clerks team, some of our other folks who do this work with us every day and hear about the great work, yes, it's one thing to see it in pictures, but to be able to see it in person and actually understand what we're doing, I think would be really, really beneficial to other members of Team Wake in the manager's office. And so just wondering how something like that gets accomplished.
I will defer to Dr. Green. I will defer to Dr. Green.
Okay, well, so Jamie, if she's just talking about a tour, that's not people eating where we have any kind of lead dust, right? Mm-hmm. So if the timing is around, on a less busy time, and well, they have to dress in a particular way. So if they were willing, so it's a short time tour. That's different than, originally Matt Smith was hoping we would have events. And of course, once we understood that we were using real weapons and creating waste of a sort, right? Then that wasn't safe for people. But a short-term tour at a at a time that we weren't keeping any other kind of training for happening, is that within the standards that we have written?
I think we could do that. People would just have to understand that there is a lead exposure reality that's occurring there, so that people, if they decide not to go, that's fine. But understanding there's a lead exposure reality there. Now, we are busy all the time, like I said. So we actually have blackout dates where we have some times where we just don't allow people to train right now because we are still working out bugs in the building and we have to do some standard maintenance and things like that.
Cleaning, so we have to clean.
Right. So we could work out some tours during that time. Chair Thomas, I will tell you that if we were going to do tours, I prefer to do them 10 or less, primarily because the acoustics are not great in that facility. And so it's hard to hear. So if you get a large crowd, it's hard to hear any questions or what's being said. So I could have several people and we could schedule it, and depending upon how many people you were going to have. We do not like to get social media out for this building. I do not like for videos to be out for this building. So I'll tell you that because it goes to the idea of we don't want the public to be able to find floor plans and potentially have any type of bad actor that knows our floor plans. When hey, we're going to have a whole bunch of public safety people in one place if there was a bad actor.
Completely understand that. And I did not even anticipate comms or social media or anything like that. I really thought about folks in the manager's office, which would include the clerks, the deputy county managers, and the commissioners.
Yes,
really is what I thought about. So who should we contact? Should we reach out to you, Jamie, with that? Should the clerks team try to coordinate that with you?
Or Jamie, if you want me to be a liaison, I can do that too.
That's fine. Either doesn't matter. What I need to know would be generally a number, and then I could tell you dates and times, and I could schedule how many people I would need to tour and to walk you through. And they would need the walking part is short, closed-toe shoes. Probably want to wear like a long sleeves, long pants.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll reach out.
Yeah, that was a great question, Chair. And of course, Dr. Green and Dr. Wicker, of course, I've been out there several times. And of course, I love coming out to the facility and watching what you guys do out there. I think that what Wake Tech has been able to accomplish, especially for out in the eastern part of the county, everybody just loves the facility in terms of what you guys are doing out there. And someone that's been involved in don't shoot scenarios, we had to go down to Fairwood to get that type of training. So to have that here in Wake County is just awesome. And of course, as a general instructor, being able to do this type of training, this is stuff that we love to see and be able to give our staff an opportunity to train in. I just have one question, and I think that you guys do this as well. Y'all do have it set up for cell extraction as well. I do believe that.
Yes, sir, we do. And we do a lot of training with Department of Correction and the PERT team as well. Right. And I do want to say we do have a virtual reality trainer there, like an old FATS, but we got the newer version, which is a Virtra. And so if there was ever a time I'll offer this that would be useful to you guys where you wanted to do a de-escalation or you wanted to see that. We could show you that on our Virtra and
Okay.
you know, if there was something that would be helpful to you in just looking through it or making any type of decision that you guys wanted to look at to see just the speed at which some of these kinds of things occur.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions from any
So
commissioners?
Chair Thomas, should I reach out to Brittany, you know, as far as sharing some
If you-
downtime?
Actually, if you would, Brittany and Tony can both coordinate with the manager's schedule and the deputy county managers, and then Tony will be able to manage, as the deputy clerk, will be able to manage the commissioner's schedule. So that would be ideal.
I just want to thank you again. Thank you all so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about something that I'm incredibly passionate about. Thank you for your partnership and thank you for your support. Thank you so much.
This
Thank
has
you,
truly
Jamie.
this has truly been a blessing. So thank you, Dr. Green and Dr. Wickham,
Stay
folks,
safe.
for coming on today. When Dr. Cabanas first mentioned, and we talked about bringing you guys on to do this presentation, I was just in total awe because I just love what you do out there. So keep up the great work, and we definitely appreciate all that you do.
Hey, come hang out with us sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, let's keep it moving. I think the next thing we got up is population of Wake County detention, the challenges. I think that's with some great staff there from our sheriff department. So we're looking forward to you guys coming on and giving us an update in terms of what you guys got going. I know y'all having fun and doing a lot of wonderful things over there on your side as well. Who's going to be up first? Is that Gene coming up first?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
I'd like to thank the Public Safety Committee Board and the commissioners for giving us the opportunity to talk about our different challenges that we're dealing with in detention. And thank you for all the support that you give us as we continue to deal with these challenges daily. And I've got here with me the senior team from detention, which is myself, Dale Butler, I'm the detention director. I've got Jermaine Bird, who is the deputy director, and Mildred Drayton, who is our business manager. Next slide. This is our two facilities that are in operation right now, and I'll talk more about the capacity and what each facility holds, but it's our John H. Baker Jr. Public Safety Center, which is our downtown facility, and then our Wake County Detention Center, which is on Hammond Road. Next slide. So our summary that we want to talk about today is the ongoing challenges with increased population at the Wake County Detention Center, the strategies being implemented to manage our population growth, and our ongoing recruiting efforts for our detention officers. Next slide. So at our Wake County Detention Center, which is our main facility, it processes all the Wake County arrests in Wake County. So anybody that's arrested in Wake County will be processed at our detention center. Our Wake County Detention Center can house 1,094 residents consisting of minimum, medium, and maximum classifications. We also have a 22-bed medical observation unit with 24/7 medical care. And we provide numerous classes from volunteers and wait tech. Next slide. And then our John H. Baker Jr. Public Safety Center, which is our downtown facility, is our secondary facility. Its capacity is 480 residents consisting of maximum custody. Our classification ranges from federal prisoners to writs, which would be from the Department of Corrections mainly, and our restricted population. Next slide. So our challenges, some of the challenges that we face with our increased population, of course, is the health and safety of our residents. Overcrowding can lead to the spread of infectious diseases. The safety for our staff, overcrowding can lead to more staff assaults. So the more residents that we have that can get irritated can lead to more staff assaults. Also not having adequate space, unable to separate our residents to create programs or to implement the type of assistance that the residents require. And of course, mental health. We deal with a lot of mental health residents in our facility. Mental illness is a common issue in the detention system. Overcrowded does not allow for a step-down unit. It can also worsen mental health problems. Next slide, please. And then our other challenges are stress on staff. Overcrowding can cause more stress for our detention staff. Gang activity, overcrowding can lead to increased gang activity and unsanitary conditions. It can lead to unsanitary conditions in our facilities. And of course, violence. It can also increase the risk of violence, self-harm, and suicide. Next slide, please. Some of the strategies that we're using to manage our population growth is our statewide misdemeanor confinement program, which is we house misdemeanor confinements that are sentenced. We limit the number of these residents that we house in our facility. Our federal inmates, we also limit the number of federal inmates that we house to help control population. And our weekenders, we limit the number of weekenders that we house. And of course, the North Carolina Department of Adult Correction, as soon as our residents receive their time, we work with Department of Corrections to transport our residents or inmates to Department of Adult Correction in a timely manner. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about our recruiting efforts and some of the things that we're dealing with in recruitment right now. We are focused on recruiting and getting more staff in to help manage that daily population that we are faced with. We have a full-time detention officer that is assigned to recruiting. So this detention officer can go to the different job fairs. He's got experience and he's able to answer the questions that come up from people that are interested in coming to work with us. And one of the big things, and I appreciate the county commissioners for making this happen, is the starting pay is equal to our deputy sheriff. That's something Sheriff Rowe wanted to do, and that was a big thing to make it fair across the board. So the starting pay is equal to our deputy sheriffs. Some of the incentives is if you have certain education, military, fluency in a foreign language, or experience in other facilities, you might already be DOCC certified, which is a detention officer certification, or you might be certified in Department of Corrections. Some of these things can give you an incentive for extra pay as well. We've put together a recruiting video by a professional company that put this together that we showed. We showed it at the state fair, and we showed it at different areas, job fairs that we go to. So we do attend job fairs. We have recruiting ads as well to try to bring in people. And we have a bonus for our staff. So our staff are able to recommend somebody, and if they are hired, they can get an incentive as well. Next slide, please. So some of our future plans that we're dealing with is we want to create a detention response team. This is something that we did have in the past, and we want to get that detention response team back. This is a response team that would help control anything going on in the facility. If we have an incident that happens, they would respond to that incident to help control it. Installing a body scanner to help control contraband entering into our facility. So we'll be getting a body scanner, sort of like what you would have at an airport, that we would have in our processing unit. So when the residents or new arrestees come in, they'll go through this body scanner to see if they have any drugs on them anywhere, in a body cavity or anywhere else. We're also getting body-worn cameras. This has already been approved, and we're in the process. We're testing one right now. But every detention officer will have a body-worn camera on, and more advanced supervisor training. We want to make sure our supervisors and our staff get the most training they possibly can. So we'll be doing more advanced supervisor training in the future, and we would like to add more canines to detention to have more canines in our facility. Next slide, please. And that's the presentation on the challenges of our increased population and our recruiting efforts. Any questions?
Okay, colleagues, anyone have any questions? I know it's a lot of stuff we're putting together today. There we go. Dr. Stallings, Commissioner Stallings.
Yes, good morning, and thank you so much for your presentation and the work you all are doing. You mentioned the programming and assistance. I think we all are very much aware of the mental health needs in our detention center and also out. And I think we're trying to work on that continuum of prevention, early intervention, and then obviously intervention in the detention center. I think we're all well aware of the mental health needs in our community, whether it be in the detention center or out. Could you talk a little bit about what programming is available inside the detention center? And is it just, let me ask that first. What type of programming is available to assist the folks in the detention center?
So we have different, we have clinicians that are here daily that evaluate in our mental health inmates, and they're seen each day and seen by psychiatrists. We also work with Denise Foreman on the committee that she's on to bring programs into our facility. We have education in our academics area that we let the inmates know that once they're released, there's programs out there to try to help them get housing or get other things to help them not return to our facilities.
What is the average stay of people in the detention center?
3 to 4 days.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so it's fairly short. Okay.
Yes.
And is there any backlog in terms of transitioning people to the Department of Adult Corrections if that's where they need to be?
Yes, we do have a backlog. So we work closely with Department of Corrections, they work close with us, but they do have backlogs that we deal with, especially since the hurricane. Once the hurricane hit in the western part of the state, a lot of those residents in the western part of the state were transported to other prisons because of the damage that was done there. And once they were transported to these other prisons, they were not able to take our residents. It's getting better now, but we do deal with backlog sometimes, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Not seeing any. I have a comment and a question. Of course, since we have, I think we got 3 different facilities, the one downtown, which is John Baker, and we got the annex, and then we got the main facility. Crazy question, but let's say, God forbid, that we had to do a major evac. What kind of things do we have in place to look at if we had to move those? And I asked that question because having worked in this type of environment, I know there's many times things come up where we may have to do a major evac.
So most of our facilities, or most facilities are built where you can evacuation within the facility from one area to another, according on where the emergency is. But if we did have to do a major evacuation, we would work with Department of Correction. We would work with all the other agencies. There's a large number of agencies in Wake County that could respond to our need. If we had to bring inmates outside of facility, that we could do a barrier with those law enforcement officers. We also can bring CAT buses in. The CAT buses, we can call them in to where we could actually put the inmates or residents on these CAT buses if it's necessary. So we do have a plan in place if this happens.
Okay, that's awesome. And also, as far as your training, you guys certified to correctional standards in terms of those have to house the individual in the detention setting. Did they go through that type of training? Are y'all certified in that as well?
Yes, so each officer has to go through detention officer certification training, which they're out at our academy for about 7 to 8 weeks. And they go through that training, and then they have to take a state exam to be certified and pass that state exam. So yes, we are certified. We also have in-service every year where we go back to in-services to keep them up to date on everything.
Yeah, well, they still at the standard then where they, I think, 40 hours or continuous training they have to meet every year, something to that effect?
Yes, sir. And we're also going through an accreditation or HCA accreditation. So we're going through accreditation now to try to get accreditation as well. Okay,
that's awesome. Okay, that's pretty much all the question I have at this time. Did anyone else have any question there? Virginia? Not seeing any. Thank you guys so much for coming on board this morning.
Again, I would like to thank you for the support that we get from the county. It's greatly appreciated, and we appreciate the teamwork that we have.
Oh, that's awesome, because there's no question you guys got a challenging job over there, and we appreciate all that you guys do. So thank you so much for being on board this morning, coming forth to do this great presentation. Thank you. And we'll keep on moving. As you guys can tell, we've had some great topics this morning. And our last topic that we got coming up is something special since we had the situation in the western part of the county. Talk about dam safety here in Wake County.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Darshan Patel with Wake County Emergency Management. So we've got a little bit here between us and GSA that manages some flood control or dam structures for the county, be able to share with you some of those details. As you know, this is pretty relevant in today's world based on some things that have happened around the country, and most importantly, what happened in the western part of our state with that event with Hurricane Helene and the Lake Lure Dam and some other dams in the area as well. Next slide, please. So in Wake County, we have approximately, next slide, please. There we go. In Wake County, we've got approximately 600 dams that are on the state registry. Of those 600 dams, 215 of those are classified as high hazard dams. 60 of them are classified as intermediate hazard dams, and 320 are classified as low hazard dams. And I have that asterisk on the slide because there's a few caveats to that number there. One, those are the dams that are on the registry, and there are dams that are not known. They're built on private property. They existed potentially before the dam safety regulations and things were in place. And some we come across as potentially problems can occur, and then they get added to the registry. So that number does fluctuate a little bit as, you know, either dams are decommissioned or we find new dams that need to be added to the registry regardless of their hazard profile. Next slide, please. So what makes a dam high hazard? And that's a question we get all the time. And part of that is the nomenclature is slowly changing at the national level to be high hazard potential. And the reason for that is dams are classified based on the level of damage that they could cause, not the likelihood of failure. It can sound very scary, you know, if you live in a neighborhood or if you live downstream of a dam that is named a high hazard dam. The dam itself is not hazardous, but, you know, if there were issues with the way it was maintained or the way it was operated, that it could have a hazard to both life and property. Some of the factors that are included in assessing the hazard potential of a dam include the population that's at risk, so the potential for loss of life, roadways and things that could be impacted. So obviously if it's going to affect a major roadway, if that dam fails in a variety of different ways, then we could have, again, significant loss of life. And then economic impacts. That's both to private property as well as businesses. And so there's a lot of factors that go into that, that happens both at the state level and the national level to set some of those standards to drive what that looks like for us. Next slide, please. So the regulatory authority for dams comes from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. Under them, they have what's called the Dam Safety Program. 49 states across the country have a dam safety program at the state level. So there's a lot of good industry knowledge that gets shared across those 49 states. And all of the regulatory authority comes from general statute, some administrative code, and then there are some other federal regulations like the coal ash regulations from the EPA that have a very significant impact on dams as well. And so those kind of get all bundled into there. The role of dam safety is to obviously regulate that, provide guidance and information to dam owners and operators, as well as coordinate with local authorities on any potential dam-related issues. One of the things that they have started doing of late is when we have significant storms and things that are going to be coming through our area, they do try to assess what water is, you know, in some of these structures, as well as what potential rainfall and things would be coming, and provide lists to us of what they consider dams of concern so that we can assess with our local teams what that would look like. They also provide a template for what's called emergency action plans. These emergency action plans drive a standardized nature to a degree on how dam owners and operators would report emergencies at their dam, and then what other actions would qualify or what they would have to do, and what qualifies as an emergency as well. Next slide, please. So this is actually from that emergency action plan template. So while the template exists, there's still a lot of variability in how they're implemented. The templates do provide a standardized naming convention for event types, the names of the different types of emergencies and the actions that need to be taken, as well as a color coding structure, so that we all know that, you know, when we say a level 1, 2, or 3 event, what does that mean? So that it's likely, hopefully not different for, you know, one dam versus the other. Though we do still see some of that variability. It's not required that they use these EAP templates, though for all high hazard and most medium hazard dams, the state does try to review those EAPs and approve them, even if they deviate from the template, to make sure that they're still following general best practices. It provides a good base, but there's still some work that needs to be done, you know, in supporting dam owners and operators and helping create some of that standardization as well. Next slide, please. So when we have emergencies related to dams, in most cases, it is a call from a local resident or someone in the area because of an unusual site or a water flow. Any of the issues that we've had over the years here in Wake County have usually originated in that way. You know, in other cases, the city of Raleigh maintains some dams for the water treatment facilities and things, and they've also called and said, hey, we've had this issue. As a responsible owner and operator, that's one of the tasks given to them as well. But again, it's usually because we see water somewhere where it's not supposed to be, or, you know, somebody's walking at their dog or taking a walk and sees, oh, you know, this land has washed away and it was not like that the last time I came for this walk, and they'll usually call it in. So we work with all of our partners, both police, fire, and EMS at times, if they have to go out to help understand what that looks like for our community. We do our best to catalog all of the dam plans that we have access to, the inundation maps in our WebEOC, which is our crisis management platform, and what we call our common operating picture, which provides us situational awareness and helps us assess impacts in our community. Our duty officers help provide that guidance to incident commanders and help coordinate both at the state level and the federal level. So in many cases, when we do have some sort of dam-related emergency that has been identified, we have to get North Carolina Dam Safety involved because they have the regulatory authority and they have the expertise to help assess what's actually happening with those dams as well. And so we'll play that role to help kind of bring all of those folks together and drive that in a coordinated fashion. And lastly, you know, what we're trying to do is work through getting our public alert and warning platform, which is Ready Wake Alerts, to be able to have as many of the inundation maps that we have access to in Ready Wake Alerts, so that all of our high hazard potential dams would have the ability to quickly send out an alert, and nobody would actually have to hand draw the areas around those dams when that emergency comes up. It's a big task. Next slide, please. So this is what an inundation map looks like. This actually comes from a state system here. So North Carolina Dam Safety and North Carolina Emergency Management have come together to be able to provide this to the local emergency management agencies. But then taking a map like this and the information here and then putting it into our public alert and warning system so that we stand ready to be able to support that, and then be able to also assess impacts as we have more development in our community. And so looking at what that would look like, how those inundation maps may change, and what that looks like from a hazard profile perspective of, you know, a dam that 20, 30 years ago may have been a low or medium hazard dam now becomes a high hazard potential dam because of additional development that's in that area. We've changed that profile of what loss of life and economic impacts could look like as well. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges that come with dams. One, at the local level, we do have limited regulatory authority, especially for things like forcing additional details in emergency action plans or forcing inundation maps to come to us in a specific format. So it does take us time in many cases to be able to then decipher what they're sending. Some cases, owners and operators of these private dams don't have the resources sometimes to be able to provide things like digital inundation maps. And so somebody's having to then hand draw them into our digital systems so we can have that record. And then data sharing between the state and local entities exists, but it can be difficult at times because there are no standards there in terms of how dam owners and operators have to provide that to the state, and then how that gets provided down to us at the local level to implement. We also have unknown dams. 6 or 8 months ago, we came across one on a private property. It was a low hazard potential, and actually, I think it ended up being an exempt dam, but it was one that nobody knew existed. It was built on private property decades ago, never came under any regulations because that property never changed hands. And when somebody was taking a walk, they noticed that some land had washed away. Dam safety got involved. It is now on the registry as an exempt or a low hazard potential dam. But there are more of those out there. As we do more development, as we come across areas, one, we're going to change dam statuses. We will have some that go from low to potentially high, or we will discover unknown dams, and that just kind of adds to that hazard profile that we share with our community emergency response partners as well. We are working to enhance the dam safety program in Wake County. That includes kind of doing what we are calling a concept of operations, understanding, what happens at the 911 centers when somebody calls and says, I have a dam-related emergency, what, information is coming to dam owners and operators, and how we can help support some of those pieces, and then being able to help connect a lot of those dots and being able to support our partners in the field if and when they come across that. So I'll pause here if there's any questions before I hand it over to GSA to talk about Wake County's flood control program.
Colleagues, anyone have any questions at this time? Okay, Commissioner Stallings.
Yes, thank you so much, Commissioner Mile, and thank you for this presentation. Just looking under your challenges slide that you just presented, you mentioned that there's limited local regulatory authority, and there was a lack of standards. Is the lack of standards coming from the state, that there's a lack of standards at the state level? Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, and most of it relates to, there's a standardized EAP template, but even nationally, this is not a North Carolina problem. This is a national thing as well, okay. Is that you don't have to use the templates. And there's no standards in how data is provided. So I would say, our neighbors to the north, Virginia, has done a great job. During COVID, they actually completely revamped all of their dam safety regulations and reporting requirements. And they went to a all electronic reporting requirement that automatically sends email notifications. It requires folks to put inundation maps in an electronic format so that they can be ingested into other systems. We are working to help kind of drive some of that here locally and at the state to be able to say, here's some of the gaps, so that we can then push our partners to be able to help drive some of those regulations where those regulatory authorities exist.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a comment and a question. In terms of, I know we got a lot of these old dams. Matter of fact, I live here close by the Neuse River. And I think about 4 or 5 years ago, they took out one of those old dams that had been around since the 1700s and 1800s. And of course, there was always that pushback anytime people look at you destroying historical markers, so to speak. But so my question to you is, did you see that taking out that dam, did it affect, did it help the flow of the water on the Neuse once they removed that old dam?
I think so, yes. I mean, we've seen water flows changed. We haven't seen any significant negative impacts from that. I think Mark may be able to speak to a little bit of that from the county's flood control program, because I believe we were involved to that to some degree as well.
Yeah, I don't have any specific data on the removal of that dam or the immediate impacts. That's one of those we would need to look at downstream flow data to determine that, but I'm not sure at this time.
Okay, awesome. Because I knew that, when the dam was in place, some of my neighbors in the back end of the subdivision, the water would back up to some of their homes at times. But it seemed like once that dam was removed, it seemed like the water flows a lot better as it moves through coming down from the northern part of the county flowing down to the southern part. That's why I posed that question, because I have seen some effect, and I know you guys kind of monitor and keep tabs on that kind of stuff. Are there any other questions at this time? Not seeing any. Great, guys. Y'all can keep moving along. Give us the.
All right, next slide, please. Okay, good morning. My name is Mark Hamlet. I'm Deputy Director for GSA. I'll be going over something that most folks out there probably have no idea that we're responsible for, and that's the Wake County Flood Control Program. We'll go back to the origins of this. The federal government began with the creation of the Watershed Protection and Flood Prevention Operations Program. This was back in 1944 through the passage of the Flood Control Act and later amended with the Flood Protection Act of 1954. Back in the 40s and 50s, there was a lot of flood damage throughout the country, and the federal government wanted to implement a program to try to protect properties and protect from loss of life from flooding. This program is managed by the USDA NRCS. That's the Natural Resources Conservation Service. That's who we partner with on all of our projects. That's the group that has managed the construction of these dams throughout the country. And since the implementation of the program, almost 12,000 dams have been constructed across the country from this program. Next slide, please. So the Wake County program began with a 1964 watershed work plan for the Crabtree Creek watershed. This plan was to ultimately create 10 flood control structures throughout the Crabtree Creek watershed. It's kind of hard to see on this on the diagram here. The green area is the Crabtree Creek watershed, and there's small white circles with numbers in those. On a larger screen, you can see this better, but this shows the locations of those 10 dams. Next slide, please. And this is a list of those 10 dams. You can see the NRCS designations on the left with the site names. Some of these that probably are easily known or everybody's familiar with, Bond Lake, Shelley Lake, Lake Lynn, and Lake Crabtree are probably ones that most folks here are familiar with. The center column shows the North Carolina Dam Safety ID. So as Darshan was speaking about the high hazard dams and state dam safety, all 10 of these are high hazard dams. They are monitored by NC Dam Safety for routine inspections as well. You can see the year constructed. So all 10 of our dams were constructed in the 70s and 80s. And then the far right column shows the location. So this shows that we've got a spread of dams throughout the county. We've got several: Morrisville, Cary, Raleigh. So they're not all focused in one municipality. Next slide, please. So after NRCS constructed or put the plan in place to construct these dams, they reached out to Wake County, and Wake County became what is known as the local sponsor. That was done through an original operations and maintenance agreement in 1975, and then later amended in 1985. And that O&M agreement gives several responsibilities to us. First of those is to perform and fund all required maintenance to the structures. So GSA has staff, dedicated staff, that goes out for about 6 months of the year, and we mow and maintain the dams and the emergency spillways. We're also responsible for inspections on those dams. We're responsible for making any repairs to any erosion on the dam. The next bullet shows a responsible replacement of parts. So this is something that we're responsible for making improvements to out the structures, or gates, valves, things like that, mechanical components to the dam. Just in the last few years, we replaced the gates on all 10 of the sites so we could more efficiently open and close those gates and lower water levels if needed. Then we're also responsible for the review of any work that takes place around these dams. And we're responsible to prohibit the installation of any structure or facility that can interfere with the operation of the structure. So the primary purpose of these structures is flood control. So if anyone tries to do a development project around the reservoirs, if they impact the flood control volume of that reservoir, then we're responsible for making comments on that and ensuring that no impacts are made. So ultimately, if someone puts any fill material within the flood volume area of these reservoirs, then they're required to mitigate and have to remove material from somewhere else. Next slide, please. So over the past year, one portion of the program that we've added, or something that's been missing, is telemetry data or level monitoring. So in July of this year, we worked with USGS and installed our first level monitoring hardware at Lake Crabtree. This was a pilot program that just to see how it worked out. The image on the right is a picture of the station at Lake Crabtree that was installed. This is a station that's shared with City of Raleigh. It's a rain gauge on top of this, and then it also has hardware that runs down into the lake to determine what the water level is. The center picture shows is a exit or snippet from the USGS website, which shows the output that we get from that station. So you can see the water level going up and down during a storm event. This also allows us to set alarms. So if water levels hit certain levels, we're notified. So if we need to get on site and try to make any adjustments to the outlet structures, we can do that. It also would let us know if there's any leaks and water starts leaving the lake quickly through the outlet. We can be notified of a leak in the system and try to get out and make repairs. This has worked well so far, and we're planning to expand this monitoring to the remaining 9 sites early in 2025. We're currently working with USGS now to identify locations of where we want to install each of these structures on the dams. We're also working with City of Raleigh to partner with them to install rain gauges at locations that make sense for them. And we're also tying all of our data in with Raleigh's flood early warning system to better model and predict flood events that could occur throughout the county. Next slide, please. Darshan spoke about emergency action plans. So as all of our dams are high hazard, we're required to create and approve these EAPs. This document provides step-by-step guidance should an emergency situation develop at a dam. It's basically if the dam breaches or overtops and fails, it identifies what is flooded downstream. On the right, the image was taken from one of our EAPs that we've currently had approved. The red hatched area shows the areas that would be flooded downstream during a rain event if the dam failed. And also noted are all the different parcels, structures, and roads that will be impacted during that flood event. These EAPs are required to be updated and resubmitted annually, and that's something that we have been working on. And our next resubmittal should take place for all 10 of our dams around the first of the year. Next slide. So another large program that we're working on with NRCS right now is the Watershed Rehabilitation Program. So this is where we take a look at all of our dams as they were constructed 40, 50 years ago. A lot has changed in those watersheds. They were designed to meet standards then. A lot of development has taken place since that time. So the first step in this process is the dam assessment. This takes about 1 year. We go in, take a preliminary assessment of the dam, do preliminary water modeling to see the impacts from the watershed, and determine if it meets, if the dam still meets the original standards. What we found so far in our projects is they do not meet current federal guidelines. So the dam assessment triggers the next phase, which is the supplemental watershed plan. I've got listed here as the planning phase. This is where we take a deeper dive into modeling and analysis of the dam and come up with alternatives to make improvements to the dam to make it meet current federal code. Once the project goes through that 2-year planning process, we would then seek funding from NRCS to proceed to the design phase. That would take another 2 years. And that would design and permit the alternative that's selected through the planning process. Once the design is complete, we would also submit and compete for funding with NRCS to go to the construction phase, and that would take approximately 2 years. Next slide, please. And this table just shows where we're at with our current supplemental watershed plan process. You can see on this list, we have 7 dams that the phase 1 dam assessment has been completed for. And all 7 of those have shown that we need to proceed to planning to proceed to identify alternatives to bring it up to federal compliance. The remaining 3 sites, we're planning to do those dam assessments in fiscal year 26. Phase 2, the supplemental watershed plan, that process is currently underway for several sites. 2 of our sites, the plan has been completed and submitted to National Watershed Management Center for review. As soon as those are approved, we'd be able to submit for design funding. And we've got 3 more of those supplemental watershed plans in progress. And then you can see between FY 25, 27, and 28, we're planning to begin the planning process for the remaining 5 sites. And then, of course, the design and construction is yet to be determined as we're at the mercy of the national group for their review. So that's a lot of information quickly, so I'll be glad to take any questions that you may have.
First of all, I would definitely appreciate this great presentation. Looking at my colleagues, does anyone have any questions at this time? Okay, I see Commissioner Evans got her hands up. Please go ahead.
Yes. So am I understanding that once we get to the planning done on these projects, the funding would come from the federal government program?
Yes, I probably should add a little more detail on that. So the dam assessment phase, that first phase, is 100% paid for by the feds. The planning is 100% paid for by NRCS as well. The design is paid for at 100%. We do have to apply and seek approval for their funding approval for all of those phases. Once we get to construction, however, it's a 65% federal, 35% local split. And I apologize, I should have clarified that.
That's helpful. And so even those that are complete in terms of the planning, which I think I saw was Bond Park and Lakeland, a couple of others, that planning has been submitted to the NCRS, and we're waiting to hear back from them. And then the timeline for construction would depend on funding availability, or would automatically start happening after the planning has been reviewed and accepted?
So the supplemental watershed plan, it goes to the National Watershed Management Center for review. Once they sign off, and that's taking up to 6 to 12 months right now. They're behind, and that's taking some time. Once they approve the plan, we could then seek for funding immediately. This is a program that takes place across the country. As I said, they've got 12,000 dams roughly that could be going through the same process. So we would have to compete against other municipalities for that same funding. There could be other dams out there that are in a lot worse shape than us. We may get funding on the first try. It could take a few years before we get funding. So that design phase would be dependent on the NRCS approval and just the criticality and where they prioritize our sites.
Okay, that's helpful. Well, I'll go ahead and say that, Commissioner Stallings and I, and maybe others, have received feedback already from the public and from Town of Cary folks that they were surprised by what's in store for the Bond Lake Dam. And some have concerns about what's been proposed as far as the solution. I'm certainly not an engineer, and I'm not going to weigh in on that one way or the other. But we use a consulting group of engineers to help develop those plans. Is that correct? And they look at various alternatives, I would assume. And do we adjust at all or go back to the drawing board at all when we get public feedback that questions what's being planned, or, and how does that whole process happen?
Okay, so A few years ago, we went through an RFQ process to hire, to identify and hire consultants, engineering consultants. We've got 2 design teams right now that are working on these plans. We've got 5 underway. 1 consulting group is working on 3. 1 is working on 2. These are consulting firms that do this exact work throughout the country. Large firms, and they're experts on this. They look at they try to identify every potential alternative along the way, and then when we get public comment, we do take that seriously. Public comment is included in those supplemental watershed plans. So every one of the 300 comments we got about Bond Lake goes into that supplemental watershed plan, and all of the different scenarios and questions that came up, we did take a look at. A lot of those are ruled out. Some things are just not feasible. But for the sake of, or for most of our dams, we likely will have to do work to the outlet structure. That's the structure that the water goes through at the dam to leave the site. And if we have to replace that, there's really not too many good ways to do that without lowering the water level, because you have to do that work in the dry. So that's what we're seeing. A lot of folks don't like hearing that the lakes will have to be lowered to do the work, but it is a temporary fix. A lot of these, we can have the projects done in 6 months or less. So it's just lowering the water level, making those modifications, and then we would fill the lake right back up. So hopefully that answered your question.
Now that's helpful. Can you speak just a little bit to the public engagement process? Did you have, say for the Bond Park 1, did you just reach out to adjacent landowners or a bigger swath? Did you have public meetings? How was the engagement executed?
So for all of these supplemental watershed plans, we have multiple meetings with the public. So when the project first begins, for all 10 of our sites, we have an agency meeting and we have a public meeting. Typically, those are held on the same day. We send out notifications to all of the potential permitting authorities, NC Dam Safety, Fish and Wildlife Resources Commission, the local municipalities. We send out invites to all of those groups to come to that first meeting to hear about what the planning process looks like, describe what we're doing, just going into that supplemental watershed plan process in a lot more detail. Same day, we have the agency meeting, but then we have the public meeting. What we've done is we've worked with GIS and we've gotten addresses from everyone that lives around these reservoirs, has property adjoining that. We've sent out letters to all of these addresses, inviting them to the public meeting. We also have been putting up signage. We're required from NRCS to advertise in the newspaper as well. I'm not sure how many people see that, but for the sake of Bond Lake, we put information up at the kiosk at the head of the trail where the boat ramp is. We put signage there. So we have a first public meeting where we talk about the upcoming planning process. Then once we get to the point where we've identified the various alternatives and look at what the impacts of those would be, we have a second public meeting where we do the same thing. We send out letters, we put signage up, we advertise in the newspaper, inviting folks to come back to that meeting where we present those alternatives, talk about the cost benefit of those, and just define that in more detail. So the next step of the public engagement, we received, after each of these meetings, there's a 30-day comment period where people can submit comments to us. As you know, we received a lot of comments from Bond Lake. Those get put in the supplemental watershed plan. We obviously take a look and try to address that if we can. In the sake of Bond Lake, we did create an FAQ page, which is on our website, and sent that out where we tried to answer most of the people's questions or concerns. Once the supplemental watershed plan document is complete, a draft of that gets published or gets posted online for another 30-day public comment period where they can read that and make additional comments. So there's a lot of public input invited, and we seek that, and it's required by NRCS. So this is not something that we do in hiding in any way. We're trying to get public input.
and I knew some meetings took place. I just wanted to, hear how the whole process worked. And I appreciate that, and don't doubt our staff at all. The only feedback that I would share as we move through these across the county is to make sure that ahead of all of this, perhaps we send some communication to the electeds in those municipalities, because I heard from the mayor and some town council folks in Cary that they did not have a heads up, didn't understand any of this, didn't know what was happening, and all of a sudden started hearing from citizens who were concerned, and they were ill-equipped to even answer the question. So information may have gone to municipal staff, at some point. And I don't know what, and even this presentation that we're having today in these cities that are going to be impacted, which looks like primarily Cary, Morrisville, and City of Raleigh, we may want to consider how we can have a little update session so that the electeds know what's coming, so they're prepared. And that is my thoughts. Thank you.
Well, that's we learned a lesson with Bond Lake. We did invite Cary town staff did come to both of our public meetings. They came to the agency meeting for the first round of meetings, and they were also present for the second round. We did not reach out directly to elected officials. At this point, I wish we would have, and that's something that I'm changing that. We've got Lake Glenn that's in the supplemental watershed plan process now. I've already got on our radar to reach out to City of Raleigh and have these conversations with them before. I don't know what the alternative is going to be with Lake Glenn, but if it requires draining the lake, then we need to have conversations before getting to that point. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you for realizing that we've got it embellished upon our engagement, and appreciate all the information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Commissioner Stallings died. Before I call on you, I see the county manager. Do you mind I go to David, are you online there? So you're up number 2. Yeah, hand up, but no response. Okay, Commissioner Stallings.
Just to piggy. Oh, wait, Dave, Manager Ellis, are you on? Do you want to speak?
Yes, I'm sorry. They silenced me today. They didn't want me to talk. So, Mark, let's have some conversations. I'm a little leery about us communicating directly to other elected officials. I think what we could do a better job of is maybe bringing you to the managers meeting that we have every other month, and having that conversation and encouraging them to make sure that they take it back to their elected officials. And maybe we send something to the clerk, but I don't want to get us into communicating directly with other elected bodies.
Okay, thank you for that. Yep, we'll do that.
Okay, Commissioner Stallings.
Right, thank you. And I was just to piggyback on Commissioner Evans just a little bit. First of all, Mark, thank you so much for the presentation and all the work. I know there's a lot of work that's been involved in this, and I know you've heard a lot from the Cary folks about Bond Lake. And I think just to other commissioners and staff who are on the call who may or may not, my feedback that I'd gotten is mostly they're very concerned about the habitat and the impact of the habitat of the lake if, in fact, the lake has to be drained. And I think that's what I heard you say. At first, I heard you say lower the water level. Then I heard completely dry. So it sounds like the potential plan would be to drain the lake. And I think they were asking, was there any alternative to save the habitat in some way? So that's the big concern that I'm hearing, and I think that continues to be their concern. But and you can speak to that if you like. Secondly, I was curious about funding and federal funding. And how that might be impacted with the different administration. And that may be too soon to tell, but I was just curious if you had any thoughts about that as well.
So the funding portion of it, I do not know. I know that they get funding every year for this program. I'm not sure how much, and it's all competitive. But I have no idea what the impacts of the administration will have on this. Obviously, any of our dams that if they do not meet current federal guidelines, we'll do what we can to bring them up to code compliance. So we will seek design funding for all of these that we possibly can. As far as the options for working on or to bring the dams up to compliance, yeah, Bond Lake does require draining the lake. You have to replace that outlet structure or do work to the outlet structure in the dry. You cannot do that underwater. The only feasible way to do that in the dry is to install a coffer dam. So basically build another dam out of, imagine driving, I'm trying to figure out a way to explain it, sheet pile, vertical steel plates. You could drive those and make a horseshoe shape around the outlet structure and create a dam within the dam to isolate the area where we're trying to work, and then you have to pump the water around that. Just the issue with that is you can, the cost is astronomical for that, for what we're seeing for Bond Lake. One of the options we came up with was about a $400,000 fix. A coffer dam would probably add $4 to $5 million to the project. And as the coffer dam is not a requirement, NRCS will not pay for that. So that's something that they would pay for the design and construction, or the prorated construction amount for what is required, that $400,000 potentially. They will not pay anything for that coffer dam. So that would be back to us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I just have a comment. Of course, there's a lot of great information, and with everything that's have taken place in the western part of the state, it's one reason why we brought this forth this morning, because we thought it was important to make sure that we're putting this information out and we have a much better understanding of how you guys are operating and what you're doing, to make sure that we don't continue to see floods, or if the fact that we may possibly have a flood. Growing up here in Wake County, of course, Crabtree Creek has always been notoriously for flooding, especially along Crabtree Valley Mall, and of course down when you get to Wake Forest Road area and through the area. And I know you guys have done a lot of work to make sure to try to minimize those types of things taking place. So from my perspective, I just want to say thank you guys for what you've done and what you continue to do, because water is always a concern, and making sure that we provide the necessary protection we can for the citizens of Wake County. If you got any other comments or any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you for your questions, and thanks for your time. And if anyone has any questions in the future about the flood control program, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much. We certainly appreciate you guys being on board with us this morning.
Thank you.
And the last thing we got, we need to go back, is that we need to approve the minutes from our September 23rd meeting. If I could get a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion been made and properly second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries and have been approved. So the minutes have been approved from our September meeting. And of course, as you can tell, there's a lot of great stuff this morning. We appreciate all our presenters coming on board this morning. We just appreciate all that they were able to provide for us. So if there's no other questions or comment, then this meeting is...
We actually have one more item on the agenda.
Okay, I didn't see it on here. I'm sorry. Please go ahead. There we go. Yeah, county jail planning and update. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm David Rutherford. Is my audio working? Everybody can hear?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
David
good.
Rutherford.
I'm sorry.
Great. Deputy Director of Facilities Design and Construction. I'm with you today with Brian Davison, the Director of General Services Administration. Last time we were in front of you back in February with Carter Goble Lee, kind of giving you an update on the projections and as well as some housing options. Since that time, y'all approved the FY25 budget that has both the annex and the detention center funding. So we'll dive in. Next slide, please. Today, I'll touch on reviewing the county's phased housing approach. Ryan will give you an update on the 2024 jail data. And then I'll follow up with the Wake County Detention Center Annex project status, then the Wake County Detention Center Phase 3 expansion project status, give you some next steps, and then take any questions. Next slide, please. Ooh, there you go. Back to the two. Next slide. There we go. All right. So the two-phase housing solution, as you recall, due to the length of time it takes to build a jail of this scale, we will need to open the Wake County Detention Annex between 25 and 2027. Just the newer 240 beds. On the graphic on the right, you can see where Phase 3 is with a red box. I'm sorry. I'll touch on that graphic in a minute. I'm sorry. But the 240 newer beds will be our temporary solution. Then we'll go into Phase 3 of the Wake County Detention Center, which is going to be 448 wet cell beds, sort of more of the high maximum security, but it's also able to house multiple different populations for separation. And that will start from FY25 through 29. And then the last Phase 4 of the Wake County Detention Center with another 448 sort of maximum security beds, and that's further out in the horizon from 2036 to 2040. But the right-hand side is the master plan for the detention center, and it just sort of shows where Phase 3 will be on the bottom left, and then Phase 4 on the right. Phase 3 does include an additional parking deck. Next slide. Ryan, I'll pass it off to you.
Great. Good morning, and thank you, David. We have updated 3 of the data slides from the spring presentation to show data through 2024 year-to-date. On this slide, the average daily population, or ADP, continues to increase in 2024 from 1383 in 2023 to 1438 year-to-date. As the Sheriff's Office shared earlier, this increase has occurred even as the Sheriff's Office has limited certain non-pretrial populations, such as the federal inmate population. Next slide, please. This slide shows the average length of stay. The good news is that the average length of stay has started to decline from its peak in around 2022 of 36.3 days. However, it's still significantly higher than historical averages. Next slide, please. And the final update shows classification levels over the past 8 years, adding in 2024 year-to-date. Over this time period, we're seeing the number of individuals classified as minimum security decrease and maximum security increase. Next slide. It's the same graphic. But maximum classification is still the highest classification, which shows the need for jail space that can continue to allow for the separation of individuals, which the Sheriff's Office shared with us earlier is very important. Especially with the increasing jail population, the amount of available space to separate individuals continues to decline. So that's our jail data update. And next slide, I'll turn it over to David for a project status update.
There you go. I'm sorry. All right, the Wake County Detention Annex. This project is going to be, we took a 2-project approach. One to try to stand up the annex as quick as possible. Project 1 is a system replacement. It has more of the long lead time materials like boilers and chillers and so forth. So we've escalated that project both in we funded in FY25 this project so that we can get it bid and procured so that we can start with the lead times that can be anywhere between 6 to 10 months for that equipment. It's the mechanical smoke control and fire alarm types of equipment. Project 2 is the actual renovation, which is refreshing the finishes, the security console, restrooms, adding windows to the housing units to meet current standards. And that portion of the work just being designed this fiscal year with construction next year. And on the graphic on the right shows the annex. The blue on the top is the original portion of the annex that was built in 1988. And then the red on the bottom portion of the slide is the newer section that was constructed in 2002, which has the 240 beds that we're planning on reopening. Next slide. This sort of shows you the schedule. We've started the design. So the dark or the light green bars are the mechanical replacement systems project. The dark green is the renovation. So the light green, we've gotten started with design, and we're hoping to bid that this spring and get the materials ordered so that as we progress through the renovation, designing it this year, finishing in July, and then getting it bid and started, that the mechanical equipment will be on site, ready to be installed, so there's no delay to the opening of the annex by the latter part of 2026. Next slide. In the FY25 budget, there was $5 million for that covers all of Project One, which is the systems replacement project, both design and construction, and then it had funding for the design of the renovation portion. And FY26 is $7 million, and that covers the remaining construction costs for the renovation. Next slide. All right, the Wake County Detention Center. This is the master plan again, showing the bottom left where phase 3 is the first phase to start, and we have 448 beds as well as a parking structure. Next slide. The phase 3, we had a new concept based on the need for separation of spaces and more maximum housing. It's about Carter Gobley helped us evolve the original phase 3 into this greater flexibility of the detention center expansion. So it's about 120,000 square feet. It's going to be a 2-level building with 8 housing units, 4 of which will have 6 sub-day rooms in addition to the main day rooms. And we'll have 448 wet cells to accommodate all populations. On the right is an example of that from the Public Safety Center, where you have your sink, toilet, and bed all in one area. Next slide. This project is obviously much larger in scale, so it takes a longer period of time to go from cradle to grave of from the beginning to end. We're starting with an RFQ for a design firm that's currently being advertised. We hope to have a selection by January, February, start going into advanced planning. That'll take us into the summer, and then which will lead right into full design, and which is going to be going through the permitting process. There's Department DHSR, which is the Division of Health Services Regulations, or the construction division, along with our local permitting. So that's the variable on the length of time it will take for permitting. But we're anticipating the construction of the expansion to take between 2 years and a little 2.5 years. So we're projecting the opening to be in sort of mid-2029. Next slide. The approved FY25 budget had 3 allocations of funding. The first was $2 million for advanced planning and programming this year. Next year is the full design at $4 million. And then in 27 is the construction budget of $146 million. Currently, we are advertising the RFQ for design firms. They'll be submitting those packages in December, and then the committee will meet through the month of January, and hopefully we anticipate to have a consultant firm selected by February of next year. Next slide. Next steps. I'm here to answer your questions today, but in the next 5 to 6 months, we're hoping that the annex mechanical system replacement project will be bid in the spring, and then we'll complete design by July, so we can keep this project moving. Wake County Detention Center Phase 3 will have this team selected in February, and then immediately start the advanced planning and programming. And the last slide. Any questions?
Okay, colleagues, first of all, thank you guys so much for the presentation. I apologize for not looking at my next page there. But we definitely appreciate you guys coming on board here, give us this great presentation in terms of where we are with the annex. And I'm sure that it's been a concern for many of you guys out there working on this. As far as since the facility has been sitting vacant so long, are you guys seeing that y'all gonna have a major concern with the plumbing system? Because normally in locked facility, the plumbing is always an issue. So you always got people flushing stuff that shouldn't be in there.
Even though it's been unoccupied, GSA still maintains the facility. There is some plumbing scope within the renovation, especially in the fixtures and so forth, that will be replaced as well. And then you get into the actual equipment itself, from some of the pumps and those things that don't run regularly will be replaced as part of the systems project. But so there's a portion that's included that's going to be new, but GSA does do an outstanding job in maintaining it even when it's unoccupied.
Awesome, good information. Colleagues, did y'all have any questions? Commissioner Stallings?
Yes, thank you all for the presentation and for sharing all this information with us this morning. I had a question about your jail classification slide. You said the overall trend is an increase of maximum security inmates, showing a hardening of inmates being housed in Wake County.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious if you might share why you think that is.
I don't have necessarily the details behind it. I think if you look at the violent crime rate per 100,000 that Jason's tracking through the strategic plan initiative, we're seeing an increase of that. And so I think there may be some more serious crimes that are just taking a longer time to go through the system, and then individuals that need to be separated. I would probably defer to the sheriff's office to speak about the nature of those being housed there, and how they're classifying those as maximum security.
Is there anyone from the sheriff's office on the call that would like to speculate or share a perspective?
I got Mr. Berg. You want to go ahead?
So it's definitely, definitely, like Ryan alluded to, the charges. One of the things that we are doing right now as we speak, we actually sent our classification person out to Cape Fear to some training, and we're going to be looking into the classification system and the development, especially as we span out into the annex, to making sure our classification system is, up to date with the current procedures and practices of classifying residents after their arrest. But to answer the question, yes, it's been an uptrend in more serious crimes, whether it be robbery, whether it be, weapons. In our classification system is doing a good job with classifying those residents per classification level as they see fit. But we're definitely looking into training and expanding our classification system as we have sent them out to Cape Fear, I believe, for a 3-day session on classification.
Yeah. Thank you. And I see our county manager, David.
Yeah, thank you. Not speaking for Madam DA, but I also think the length of time, if the DA's office is not, if the DA's office needs additional ADAs, and I believe their last study they were short, that also could impact the length of stay for these cases.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Not seeing any, so again, guys, thank you so much for bringing forth this great presentation, giving us an update in terms of where we are with the tension over there, in terms of how long does it take to bring it online. There's like a great lot of work going to be going on, and we're looking forward to seeing the completed product. So again, thank you so very much. And colleagues, if there are no other questions, I think I'm actually at the end this time. If there are no other questions, I want to thank everybody for being online this morning. Great presentation and great information. So if there's none, then this officially called the meeting and said the meeting is adjourned, and looking forward to seeing our colleagues at 2.
Just great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care. Have a great afternoon, guys. Appreciate it.
What's it 2? What's it 2?